Amin always seemed like an ordinary bookstore owner. But beneath his calm exterior, he held secrets that could expose a powerful and dangerous network. Secrets that put his life at risk and revealed the dark truth hiding in plain sight. The neighborhood looked ordinary at first glance. Sunlight spilled over neatly trimmed lawns, children played on the sidewalks, and neighbors exchanged friendly nods as they went about their routines. From the outside it seemed like a place untouched by the kind of darkness that could disturb a community's peace. But beneath the surface, something was quietly wrong. Among the seemingly ordinary residents was Amin, a man who ran a small bookstore at the corner of one street. His shop was a cozy space filled with shelves of books ranging from literature to religious texts. People trusted him, sought his advice, and welcomed his warm smile, never suspecting the thoughts that ran through his mind. Amin had lived in the neighborhood for years and knew its rhythms, its quiet corners, and its hidden patterns. He noticed the details most overlooked: a visitor who lingered too long, a whispered conversation behind closed doors, the subtle nervousness of someone walking too fast. These small observations, which others dismissed as trivial, weighed heavily on him because he knew they were signs of something much larger, something dangerous. The community organization Amin was part of appeared harmless to outsiders. They hosted charity events, prayer gatherings, and study circles. To the untrained eye, they were just devoted members working to support their neighbors. But Amin had seen the other side. The group had its own rules, codes, and hierarchy, and within its ranks, loyalty was demanded without question. Those who hesitated or asked too many questions were quickly ostracized or worse. Rumors of disappearances had circulated for years, stories that people whispered in fear. Yet no one ever spoke of them openly. The organization's power was subtle yet overwhelming. It reached into personal lives, influencing decisions and shaping the community from the inside. Amin had spent years observing, piecing together the small threads that hinted at something sinister. It began with small things: missing donations that never reached their intended recipients, members vanishing for days without explanation, and subtle threats disguised as advice. At first, he dismissed them, convincing himself that he was imagining patterns where there were none. But over time, the evidence became impossible to ignore. The once friendly faces of neighbors and colleagues now carried hidden intentions, and the safety he had once felt in his home slowly dissolved. Even the streets, bright and sunny during the day, seemed to hide shadows that were impossible to escape. The tension in the neighborhood grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. A sense of unease lingered behind every casual greeting, every handshake. A man watched people whisper in corners, always cautious about who might be listening. He began to understand the invisible rules that governed the community: who spoke when, who avoided certain topics, and who was careful to smile while hiding fear. Each day brought new observations, and each observation confirmed what he had long suspected: that appearances were deceptive, and beneath the calm exterior, a dangerous world existed. In this quiet neighborhood, life seemed simple, safe, and normal. Yet for Amin, every moment was a reminder of the fragile line between safety and danger. He realized that the community he thought he knew was a carefully constructed illusion, and the more he understood, the more he realized the risks he faced simply by living there. The ordinary streets and sunny days masked secrets so dark that no one could imagine them, and Amin was slowly learning that in this neighborhood, nothing was ever as it seemed. Amin's life was more complicated than anyone in the neighborhood could have guessed. By day he was the quiet bookstore owner, arranging shelves, helping customers find books, and exchanging polite smiles with neighbors. He was the kind of man people trusted, the kind who seemed harmless and familiar. But by night, Amin existed in an entirely different world, a world full of secrets, rules, and unspoken dangers. He had become an insider in a community organization that few outsiders understood, an organization that claimed to do good but operated in shadows where morality and legality were often blurred. Amin had not joined it for power or influence. He had joined out of a desire to belong, to connect with people who shared his faith and values. What he found instead was a complex network of control, manipulation, and fear. The deeper Amin went, the more he realized how carefully the organization protected itself. Members were expected to follow strict codes of behavior, attend meetings regularly, and never question leadership decisions. Obedience was not suggested, it was demanded, enforced by subtle threats and social pressure. Those who failed to conform often disappeared from the community's public life without explanation, and whispers about their fates circulated only in private. Amin had seen the consequences of defiance firsthand. A young member had once challenged a leader's instructions and was never seen again. No one spoke about it, but the fear lingered like a shadow over every gathering, and Amin felt it every time he attended a meeting. Over the years, Amin learned to navigate this world cautiously. He observed the hierarchy, memorized the rules, and studied the leaders' patterns. He realized that the organization's true power was not in its numbers or finances, but in its ability to influence people silently. Relationships were monitored, loyalty was measured, and even small mistakes could be interpreted as betrayal. Amin often felt trapped, aware that revealing what he knew could put him in danger. At the same time, he could not ignore the unethical activities he witnessed: manipulation of funds, intimidation of vulnerable members, and a hidden system that punished those who stepped out of line. Each day, the weight of knowledge grew heavier, and Amin's internal struggle intensified. Despite the danger, Amin began to take notes in secret, documenting patterns and incidents that others ignored or feared to see. He recorded the disappearances, the coded messages, the financial irregularities, and the subtle psychological tactics used to control members. With each entry, his sense of urgency grew. He was no longer a passive observer, he was becoming a keeper of dangerous truths, a position that came with immense responsibility and risk. He understood that if the wrong people discovered his actions, he could become the next person to vanish quietly. Amin's dual life created a constant tension. By day, he maintained the image of a trusted shopkeeper and community member. By night, he pieced together a story no one else wanted to see. A story of power and secrecy, hiding beneath the familiar smiles of his neighbors. He realized that the world outside the organization could never truly understand its inner workings, and even sharing small details could have catastrophic consequences. Each revelation deepened his understanding of the organization's reach and cunning. Amin's life had become a careful balance of observation, caution, and silent resistance, and he knew that one wrong move could shatter everything he had built. The line between safety and danger had grown thin, and Amin lived every day acutely aware that his knowledge was both a burden and a weapon. He understood that being an insider meant seeing the truth others ignored, but it also meant that he could never fully trust anyone. In this world of hidden power, Amin had become a witness to secrets that could destroy lives, including his own, and the weight of that knowledge shaped every decision he made. The first disappearance shattered whatever fragile sense of safety the neighborhood had left. Sami was a young man in his early 20s, known for his quiet nature and dedication to the community. He attended gatherings, helped with charity events, and seemed genuinely eager to learn and grow within the organization. No one could have predicted that he would be the first to vanish, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a growing wave of fear. Amin noticed the absence almost immediately. At first, he thought Sami had simply gone on a trip or visited relatives, but days turned into a week, and there was still no sign of him. His friends and family grew anxious, yet no one spoke openly about the situation. The community's veneer of normalcy remained, but beneath it tension and unease rippled silently. Amin's instincts told him this was not a random event. He remembered other small hints over the years, the hushed conversations, the warnings disguised as advice, the subtle glances that seemed to communicate more than words ever could. He began to piece together a pattern, realizing that Sami's disappearance fit a disturbing sequence that had likely been occurring for years. The organization's power was not overt. It did not announce its actions or leave evidence. It operated like a shadow, moving quietly and leaving only fear in its wake. Amin understood that if Sami had truly crossed a line or failed to follow an unseen rule, the organization would have acted swiftly and decisively, and no one would question it. The lack of communication from authorities only deepened Amin's suspicion. When families reported missing members, investigations were slow, minimal, or sometimes completely absent. The police seemed reluctant to interfere, and neighbors offered vague reassurances that rang hollow. It became clear to Amin that the influence of the organization reached far beyond the community itself. Its power was subtle but immense, extending into places where ordinary citizens could not even hope to seek justice. The realization was chilling. Those who disappeared did so in a way that erased both their presence and the possibility of public scrutiny. Amin became increasingly vigilant, watching for signs that might indicate Sami's whereabouts or fate. He retraced the young man's recent activities, observed meetings more closely, and noted who had interacted with him in the days leading up to his disappearance. Each detail, no matter how minor, was catalogued in Amin's secret notebook. He realized that ordinary life, smiling neighbors, sunny streets, familiar shops, was only a mask, hiding the organization's hidden operations. The peaceful exterior of the neighborhood now felt like a prison, a space where danger moved quietly and invisibly, always present even when unseen. The disappearance left a permanent mark on Amin. He understood that the organization did not tolerate curiosity or resistance. Witnessing Sami's sudden vanishing was a stark reminder of his own vulnerability. It also ignited a sense of urgency. He could no longer remain a passive observer. The patterns he had ignored for years demanded attention, and the risks of inaction were now painfully clear. Amin knew that uncovering the truth would be dangerous, yet the thought of staying silent while others vanished weighed heavily on him. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort and familiarity, had transformed into a landscape of hidden threats, each corner potentially concealing secrets that could destroy lives. As days passed, the fear lingered like a shadow over the sunny streets. Amin became hyper-aware of every interaction, every glance, every whispered word. He understood that the first disappearance was only the beginning, a signal that the organization's reach was deeper and more dangerous than anyone could imagine. And in that realization, Amin made a silent promise. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost, even if it meant walking a path fraught with danger and uncertainty. Amin had always been observant, but after Sami's disappearance, his awareness sharpened to a level he hadn't experienced before. Every detail, every seemingly insignificant action within the community now carried weight. It wasn't long before he began noticing patterns that others overlooked. At first, they were subtle, a ledger with numbers that didn't add up, a receipt that vanished from a collection of charitable donations, an envelope delivered late in the night. On their own, these anomalies could be dismissed as human error. But Amin saw the connections. He realized that someone, or something, was leaving messages, but in a way that only insiders could decode. These hidden signals were part of a complex system designed to communicate without alerting outsiders. Amin began to investigate quietly, studying the notes, ledgers and letters that came into his bookstore. Some were coded in simple ciphers, others in symbols that mimicked religious references, and a few were purely financial, but contained irregular patterns suggesting money was being diverted to unknown locations. It became clear that the organization was not only controlling people but also manipulating resources with precision. This was no longer a matter of petty theft or mismanagement. It was an orchestrated system, meticulously designed to avoid detection. Amin realized that these hidden messages weren't just about money, they were about power, control, and secrecy. As he delved deeper, Amin discovered that these coded communications often coincided with events in the neighborhood. Disappearances, sudden transfers of funds, and unexplained absences of members. It was as if the messages were both warnings and confirmations, signaling when action had been taken and when further steps were required. The organization operated like a living entity, each member a small but essential part of a larger hidden structure. Amin's mind raced as he connected these threads, understanding that anyone who ignored or misinterpreted the messages could quickly find themselves in trouble. The danger became more personal as Amin realized he had been inadvertently included in some of these communications. Certain gestures, phrases, and visits were meant to test his loyalty, to see if he could be trusted with the knowledge he was accumulating. The awareness that he was being watched, evaluated, and potentially manipulated added an invisible weight to his every movement. Even inside his bookstore, a place that once felt safe, Amin now felt the pressure of hidden eye. He had to be careful not to draw attention to his investigations while continuing to gather evidence. Despite the risk, Amin pressed on, driven by a growing sense of responsibility. He started documenting the messages systematically, creating a secret record that could one day expose the organization's inner workings. He realized that understanding these messages was the key to protecting others from the same fate as Sami. Each symbol and irregularity held a story, and each story revealed a deeper layer of the organization's reach and cunning. Amin's life had become a delicate balance between observation and caution, between knowledge and survival. The discovery of these hidden messages changed Amin's perspective forever. The neighborhood, once seemingly calm and predictable, a stage for a carefully orchestrated network of control. Every smiling face and friendly gesture now carried a potential meaning, a hidden message waiting to be decoded. Amin knew that his next steps would be crucial. One mistake could expose him, and the organization would not hesitate to silence those who threatened its secrets. As he pieced together the cryptic signs, a chilling realization settled over him. Uncovering the truth would not only reveal the organization's crimes but could also put his own life in danger. Amin had grown accustomed to the hidden dangers of the organization, but nothing could have prepared him for the shock of betrayal. Over the years he had learned to trust very few people, carefully observing their actions, their words, and the smallest gestures that revealed intentions. Yet even his caution had limits, and the realization that someone close to him was working against him shook him to the core. The person he had believed to be an ally, someone who had shared knowledge, supported his quiet observations, and offered guidance within the community, was secretly reporting to the organization's leaders. Every conversation, every subtle nod, every hint of reassurance had been a carefully constructed facade. Amin's sense of security shattered as he realized that he had been watched, assessed, and possibly manipulated from the start. The betrayal forced Amin to re-evaluate everything he thought he knew. Relationships he had trusted, connections he had had on, and even his own judgments were thrown into question. The knowledge that someone close could betray him so completely created a paranoia that settled deep in his mind. Every step he took, every action he considered, now had to be measured against the possibility of exposure. The simple act of walking through the neighborhood or attending a meeting became fraught with invisible danger. Amin understood that the betrayal was not only personal, it was part of a larger strategy by the organization to maintain control, to test loyalty, and to eliminate threats before they became unmanageable. As Amin observed his surroundings more carefully, he began noticing subtle signs of surveillance. A neighbor who lingered too long while passing by, an unusual frequency of visits from certain members, and even the carefully phrased questions from familiar faces, all became pieces of a growing puzzle. The realization was terrifying. There was no longer a safe space for him. Even the bookstore, once his sanctuary, felt exposed. Every visitor could be a potential informant, every interaction a risk. Amin became meticulous, keeping his records more securely, observing people from different angles, and altering routines to avoid predictable patterns. His life had transformed into a constant dance of caution, observation, and calculated risk. The betrayal also heightened Min's determination. He understood that uncovering the organization's secrets was more urgent than then. If someone close enough to him could betray his trust, it meant that the organization's network was far more pervasive and entrenched than he had imagined. Every new discovery, every hidden document or coded message, became a tool not just for exposing wrongdoing, but for survival. Amin realized that silence would not protect him. Only knowledge, carefully gathered and strategically used, offered a chance to stay one step ahead. The psychological weight of betrayal was immense. Amin wrestled with anger, disbelief, and fear, but he also recognized the clarity it brought. The facade of community warmth had been stripped away, revealing the ruthless efficiency of an organization determined to control and intimidate. He understood that the betrayal was a turning point. It marked the moment when passive observation was no longer enough. Amin had to act, to gather evidence, and to prepare for the day when he would reveal the truth. Yet even as he made these decisions, the shadow of danger loomed, a reminder that one wrong move could end not only his quest for justice, but his very life. The experience of betrayal left Amin cautious, vigilant, and sharper than ever. It reinforced a chilling truth. In a world built on secrets and obedience, trust was a luxury he could no longer afford, and survival depended on knowledge, strategy, and the ability to navigate a web of deception where even the closest allies could be enemies. Amin understood that knowledge alone would not be enough to challenge the organization. He had seen the patterns, traced the coded messages, and watched the consequences of defiance, but observing from the shadows could only take him so far. To expose the truth, he would need evidence, undeniable proof, that could survive scrutiny and reveal the organization's operations to the outside world. The task was perilous. The organization had eyes everywhere, and even a small misstep could alert them to his intentions. Amin knew that gathering evidence would require patience, precision, and an extraordinary degree of caution. Every move had to be calculated, every detail considered. He began by identifying sources that would provide the clearest picture of the organization's activities. Financial documents, internal letters, meeting records, and coded communications became his targets. Amin spent long nights in the bookstore after closing hours, sorting through files, taking photographs of documents, and compiling notes in a secret journal. He became methodical, creating a system that allowed him to track events, symbols, and names without leaving any trace. Each discovery brought him closer to understanding the full scope of the organization's operations and the individuals responsible for maintaining its control. The danger was constant. Amin realized that the organization's surveillance extended beyond meetings and public gatherings. Some members had access to personal records, phone calls were monitored, and even casual conversations could be reported back to the leaders. He learned to communicate in code, to leave no fingerprints on digital devices, and to move stealthily within familiar spaces. Every step carried risk, and every new piece of evidence could be the one that exposed him. Despite the fear, Amin pressed on. He understood that if he did not act, more people could vanish like Sami, and the organization would continue its operations unchecked. A plan began to form in his mind. Amin could not confront the organization directly. He knew such an attempt would be suicidal. Instead, he needed to leak the information to someone outside, a journalist who could take the documents public and force authorities to act. He approached this step with extreme care, vetting contacts, observing their behavior, and ensuring that they could be trusted. The risk of betrayal or error was high, and the possibility of being discovered was terrifying. Amin's nights were filled with tension, each moment a delicate balance between action and concealment. As he collected evidence, Amin discovered more than he had anticipated. The organization's reach was vast, and the methods it used to control members were sophisticated and insidious. He found proof of financial manipulation, intimidation, and covert surveillance. He documented patterns of disappearances and coded instructions that had been passed along for years. The realization of the organization's power was both horrifying and motivating. Amin understood that he held a key to exposing something much larger than he had initially imagined. The weight of the plan pressed heavily on him. Amin knew that if the evidence were ever traced back to him, the consequences would be immediate and severe. Yet he also recognized that inaction was no longer an option. The first disappearance had proven that the organization could silence anyone without question, and remaining passive would only allow its influence to grow. Every document he secured, every photograph he took, was a step toward justice, a step toward shining a light on a world built on secrecy and fear. Amin's dangerous plan was set in motion, and the tension of what might happen next hung over him like a constant shadow. Amin had taken every precaution, yet as he prepared to hand over the collected evidence to the journalist he trusted, a chilling realization struck him. The organization's was far larger, deeper, and more connected than he had ever imagined. The leaders were not just local figures or community elders. They had influence in institutions he had always assumed were impartial. Even people he had counted on for guidance or support were either members or under the watchful eyes of the organization. The journalist, carefully vetted and seemingly courageous, hesitated in ways Amin could not ignore. Subtle body language, a flicker of fear in their eyes, and questions that went beyond professional concern, revealed that they too were aware of the consequences of exposure. The truth he had painstakingly gathered could not be released without risk, and the safety he had hoped to create for others seemed to slip further away with every passing moment. The realization hit Amin like a physical blow. The organization's network was not just powerful, it was meticulous, calculating, and ruthless. He began to see patterns he had previously missed: unexpected absences of certain members, sudden relocations, and the way leaders subtly reinforced obedience through fear rather than overt threats. Every detail he had observed over the years suddenly made sense in a larger, terrifying context. The disappearances, the coded messages, and the financial manipulations were all part of a carefully orchestrated system designed to maintain control and silence anyone who posed even a slight threat. Amin understood that his own knowledge now placed him directly in the crosshairs. As he weighed his next steps, Amin realized that the organization had likely been aware of his investigations for some time. The meticulous care with which he had moved through meetings and documents may have delayed detection, but it had not prevented it. Every action he had taken, every note recorded, and every observation made could have been observed indirectly, leaving him vulnerable. The magnitude of the conspiracy became clear. This was not a small, localized issue, but a network that had tentacles reaching into spheres he had assumed were safe. The very people and systems he had relied upon were potential threats, and the line between ally and adversary was no longer visible. Faced with this shocking revelation, Amin had to adapt quickly. He devised a new plan, one that relied not only on careful evidence collection, but also on deception, misdirection, and extreme caution. He understood that trust could no longer be extended, even to those who appeared reliable. Every move had to be calculated with precision. One misstep could result in exposure, retaliation, or disappearance. The complexity of the organization's operations meant that Amin could no longer approach the situation as an insider acting alone. Survival required patience, strategy, and an acute awareness of the invisible web surrounding him. The psychological weight of this revelation was immense. Amin felt the chilling isolation that came with understanding the true scale of the danger. The neighborhood he had once walked confidently through now seemed like a labyrinth of threats, with eyes hidden in every shadow. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error had vanished. Yet in the midst of fear and uncertainty, Amin's determination hardened. The truth could no longer remain buried. The organization's control was maintained through secrecy, and exposure, even partial, was the only path to justice. With this clarity, Amin accepted that the coming days would test him like never before. The evidence he had gathered was now a double-edged sword, a tool of liberation for others, but a beacon that could mark him as a target. Every decision, every action, had to be made with the awareness that the organization's reach extended further than he could see. Amin had come face to face with the full scale of the conspiracy, and in that confrontation, the tension reached its peak. The next steps could either bring the truth into the light or place him in mortal danger, with no certainty of escape. Amin moved carefully, knowing that every step could determine whether the truth would see the light or he would disappear like those before him. He had prepared meticulously, securing the evidence he had collected over months: photographs, financial records, coded messages, and documents that proved the organization's influence extended far beyond what anyone had suspected. He knew that once the information reached the right hands, investigations could begin, exposing the network that had manipulated, intimidated, and silenced so many. Yet the process of releasing it was fraught with danger. One wrong move could alert the organization, and there was no way to predict their reaction. Amin's heart raced with a combination of fear and resolve as he planned the final step. He chose to act under the cover of night, taking precautions to ensure anonymity. Digital trails were carefully erased, physical copies were hidden, and his communications were encrypted. Amin understood that the organization's power lay not just in what it could do openly, but in its ability to track and anticipate actions. Every detail of his plan had to be flawless. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just for himself, but for everyone who had suffered in silence, for Sami and the others who had vanished without explanation. The stakes were immense, and failure was not an option. When the evidence was finally delivered to the journalist, Amin could see the gravity of what he had accomplished reflected in their eyes. This was more than just a story, it was an unveiling of a hidden world, a web of secrecy and control that had been carefully maintained for years. The journalist, though visibly shaken, understood the importance of the material. Amin knew he had taken the first step in bringing the organization's crimes into the public eye, and that knowledge brought both relief and an acute awareness of the risks that still lay ahead. In the days that followed, news of investigations and arrests began to surface. Members of the organization were questioned, documents scrutinized, and some of the network's hidden operations exposed. The public finally began to see the extent of the influence that had been carefully hidden in plain sight. Amin watched from the shadows, satisfied that the truth was emerging, but aware that the process was far from complete. While the exposure brought justice for some, it also reminded him that power, secrecy, and fear could never be entirely eradicated. The organization had been weakened, but remnants remained, vigilant and ready to react to any threat. Amin's own position remained precarious. Though he had acted anonymously, he knew that the organization would eventually seek out the source of the leak. His life could never return to the normalcy of before. The neighborhood, once familiar, now seemed like a landscape of potential danger. Every friendly face could hide suspicion. Every street held the memory of secrecy and manipulation. The knowledge he carried was both a burden and a weapon, and he had to navigate the world carefully to ensure his survival. Yet in the midst of fear and uncertainty, Amin felt a measure of triumph. The truth had been unmasked, the shadow over the community partially lifted, and the stories of those who had vanished could finally be acknowledged. The courage to act in the face of danger had made a difference, even if the full consequences would unfold slowly. Amin disappeared into the shadows, leaving no trace, his presence a quiet reminder that courage often comes at the cost of anonymity and solitude. The revelations he had set in motion would ripple far beyond the neighborhood, exposing corruption and secrecy that had thrived in silence for too long. In the end, Amin's journey illustrated the dangerous power of hidden networks, the fragility of trust, and the strength required to confront what others fear. The truth had been revealed, but the shadows remained, a constant reminder that courage and vigilance are inseparable when exposing the unseen forces that shape lives. Amin's experience became a testament to the cost of knowledge, the weight of responsibility, and the enduring impact of unmasking the hidden truths that so many try to ignore.